You once said in one of your show exhibition catalogs, most of my pieces are not fluid. There's a lot of noise going on beneath the surface. What do you mean by that?
Well, you're kind of catching me unawares with my pants down. I mean, sometimes when you say things, you will say things intuitively that you hope will explain what the nature of your work is all about. The noise, the activity, the energy that a piece begins to exercise means really that the piece is not like a human being, that the piece has its own life. And unlike human beings, pieces of sculpture don't have skins. You know what it's like if you open up a human being. You know there's muscle underneath, you know that there's bone which the muscle hangs onto and so forth and so on. You know that there's systems where the blood runs through and so forth and so on. You don't have that in a piece of sculpture. So you have to invent a vocabulary and anatomy for what happens in a piece of sculpture. And while it's true that there aren't any ears that hear, there is a noise that takes place in a piece of sculpture. There's also an atmosphere that is energized around the piece of sculpture. Now, there are some individuals that have that kind of atmosphere around them, and we call it charisma. There is no piece of sculpture that I know of, regardless of whether it's abstract or whether there's a reference point to something that we might associate with an object in nature, that doesn't have that kind of energy-producing factor in it. I don't know if that answers your question or
What were some of
expands
the
on.
What were some of the early experiences and influences you had as an artist living on the West Coast?
Well, among the most dominant experiences as an artist that I have had in relation to other artists was the influx of interest in the Mexican mural painters. And the dominant individual that interested me, that happened to have come to Southern California at a time when I was conscious of the fact that he would be available, was Siqueiros. And when Siqueiros came to Los Angeles, I volunteered my time and my energy to be of assistance to him. And particularly when he painted the Plaza Art Center fresco mural, I was very happy to be associated to taking his directions and so forth and so on, and seeing that it was executed.
What was it like studying with him?
You didn't study with him. There were things that had to be done, and some of them were labor things, that forces that had to be exercised, like the carrying of cement and sand. One of the best things that I got out of him was listening to some of the stories that he told about his own experiences as a young artist, how they tried to destroy the academic institution where he had gone to school, how he was exposed to some of the energies that were taking place in Paris when he was a cultural attaché. Likewise, his first trips to Italy, when he saw the frescoes of Giotto and some of the others in the company of Rivera, and listening to what was actually part of formation of the earth-shaking consequences. It was of great interest to me as a young artist.
Who are some of the artists that have influenced you throughout your career?
Well, I would say that Picasso, among the contemporaries, One of the artists that doesn't show that influenced me a great deal was Courbet. And the reason I say that it doesn't show and influence me is because when I was 12 years old, my father took us across the country from Los Angeles to New York, primarily to visit his relatives, secondly, to buy a new car, which was much, much cheaper if you went to Detroit proper. So in taking us to New York, he left his family in New York and then went on to Detroit and picked up a new Dodge, came back to New York, picked us up, and we went back to Los Angeles. But during that interim, one of the most important things that happened to me was a trip to the Metropolitan and subsequent trips as well. And when I walked into the room in which the Courbet was situated, I was floored. I just, in all my life, short as it was in Los Angeles, had never seen any painting that had so effectively moved me as those Courbets had. And I said, well, if that is something that a painting can do to a human being, that's the kind of activity and energy and community I would like to join. And from then on out, I felt that the place to be is where those kind of paintings are available to be seen, and New York was the place.
What was New York like as an art center when you moved here?
It was very, very limited. There were very few galleries. The Museum of Modern Art just opened up. The favorites were Daumier, Van Gogh, Seurat, and the opening shows were very sparse. The museum was located in the Heckscher Building. The Whitney Museum was on 8th Street. Basically speaking, there was no Guggenheim at that particular time. Basically speaking, I would say there were like 5 important galleries, and most of them located around 57th Street, and important mostly because they dealt with contemporary works. In the next 5 years or thereabouts, there were a number of other galleries that opened up, and the Julian Levy one, the Surrealist Gallery. There was various galleries that began to take on importance because of the subsequent exhilarating, cultivated interest in the art world. And one of the most important things I think that did happen was the patronage that the government began to exercise over the arts during the Depression in the early 30s, and then on into the middle 30s. And the subsequent WPA project, which was a fantastically stimulating thing that began to take place in the arts.
Now, you were involved with the WPA when you were in San Francisco, is that right?
Right.
And what kind of project were you executing during that period?
One of the first things that I did was, after coming back from Mexico and after working on a mural in Mexico, working on a mural in the library of a sanitarium south of Los Angeles. And the next thing was working in the chemistry building of what was then San Francisco State College, but I think now is part of the University of California Extension in San Francisco. And the theme that I took for this particular mural was alchemy. It is the birth of chemistry, and I felt would have lasting interest for the activity that was going on in that particular building. It was there before chemistry was born, and the interest may be there even after the kind of chemistry that was known then will have disappeared.
How did you arrive at working with clay material?
Well, initially, after World War II, established myself in New York, I spent most of my time drawing and painting on at one point, living in New York became pretty much like it is now. Very, very difficult. There weren't too many places that one could find. There were many places being torn down and skyscraper apartments being put up. And the result was that the artists were finding it less and less conducive to stay and live in New York. So we started to look for a place, and not finding anything in New York City proper, we went out to the island where we had lived previously and couldn't find anything satisfactory there, and then found a place in North Jersey, 60 miles from New York. 60 miles was still within scope of being able to participate in the life, which I decided I don't want to get more than an hour and a half away from the city. And while I was there in the country with a house and a barn and land, we made the mistake, let's say, of buying an animal, a calf. And it wasn't very many days, weeks, months, years before one calf expanded itself into a dairy herd. And I found myself, instead of spending my time as an artist, I was spending my time and energy and economic interests as a dairy farmer. And over a period of years, less and less time as an artist and more time as a farmer. Now, during that period of time, I also raised pigs. Pigs were slaughtered for the table. Piglets were sold, and so forth and so on. And it became a very rewarding, remunerative business. But then, irritatingly enough, I felt this haunting desire to be what I really was intended to be, and that is a worker in the arts. And at odd moments, I would start drawing. What I was really doing was drawing pieces of sculpture. And over this period of a year, 2 years, 3 years, I had a group of drawings that actually were representations of sculptural projects. When the time came to make the decision as to what the direction was going to be, the one thing that was in our way was the fact that you cannot have the energy to be a sculptor and still have the energy to take care of a herd of cows. So the cows went.
The clay pieces are very textural. There's a lot of marking. The surfaces are very active.
I don't think of it as texture. I mean, I think of it as language. I think that what happens is that the hand talks through the clay. The movement of the hand is documented, is arrested by the clay. The word, whatever the movement happens to enunciate, is there. It's not speaking as a texture that would amuse or become a decoration for the eye. It's speaking much as words are spoken in poetry. Now, they may not be meaningful from the dictionary point of view, but become very meaningful in another kind of context. And that context having more to do with inner feeling than with outward dictionary definition.
What motivates you, or what are your concerns about putting a color or a patina on the clay?
Well, in the first place, I would like to have the work be as close to its initiation, to its origin. And if it were 12 inches high when I finished it, when I felt that it reached its peak, as a wet, pliable plastic piece of material, dry, and fired in the kiln so that it would have a sense of stability when being handled, I want it to be 12 inches high. Now, I'm able to achieve that by a few little technical bypasses, by including a large percentage of material into the plastic clay that has already been fired, drying it very carefully, firing it very, very slowly, so that if I have a piece that I have made that has taken a month or 6 weeks to dry, and an extraordinarily long time to fire, and comes out exactly the same size as when I made the thing, I'm very happy about it. Now, this sometimes means very low firing. And in the low firing, I often get a color that is very unresolved, that isn't the kind of color that I think makes its presence felt. And in that sense, I can take the clay and stain it or work with it, paint it. I'm reminded of some pieces I saw in India, terracotta pieces that were part of a Jain altarpiece. And when I saw them, it was getting close to dusk. And when I went by in a horse and buggy, I had the driver stop because these pieces radiated their own light. And of course, they radiated their own light for two reasons. One reason, because of the intent of the artist to confirm his faith. And often one sees pieces that actually are radiant. And the radiance has to do not so much with the kind of material or the way in which it is handled, but the belief that the individual had in what it was that he or she was doing. Now, they were painted white, and they were terracotta, and they actually were painted, because I was able to make enough of an analysis to see that these pieces were terracotta and were not glazed, but were actually painted. I don't think that we should have any feeling about what it is that we put on or what we don't put on a piece, regardless of what material it's made out of, whether it's wood or whether it's bronze or whether it's clay. How we deal with it makes very little difference. What it ends up as being and what it ends up as saying is the important thing. There isn't any question when you speak about, as you do speak about, the thematic aspect. There isn't any question, but I am interested in females. I'm interested in, if not my own mother, at least the concept of not necessarily motherhood, but the whole idea of the creative process. For me, it's an absolutely fantastic, phenomenal, cherished, worshipful, overwhelming way in which life finds perpetuity. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but its being that way, I find to be something that should be held in very high regard and respect, and I don't mind making altars to the whole idea of the mother figure. For many, many hundreds of years and maybe thousands of years, the mother goddess dominated the earth. I'm very much carried away by that particular concept. I'm likewise carried away by the other things that you've talked about. I think there is other elements, there are other elements with which I may be involved. I think that some of my pieces have a kind of a wit about them. Not that they are funny, not that they are humorous, but there is a very subtle nuance in some of the pieces that you may not have seen, particularly in some of the small pieces. They're worth a second look to see if you can find some of the humor that's in there.
What is your working process with clay? How do you begin a piece?
How do I begin? Well,
Where do those ideas
where do they come from? They, I don't think they come from any place other than where other ideas come from, and that's an unknown factor. I don't think we're really able to say, I'm going to get up in the morning and do something that the world has never seen before. When such a thing does take place, as has taken place on more than one occasion, ask the artist, and very rarely is he able to give you a satisfactory answer. Ask Picasso what brought Cubism into being. And he very innocently says, we were just trying to express ourselves. Well, carry that innocence out. Just express yourself. And you'll find a very cogent explanation for many of our activities of creativity. We're just trying to say, we're trying to find out where we came from. What is it we're doing here? Where are we going? And the aspect, the position, the how and the why all begins to take on a very original, innovative aspect of trying to find the answer, the impossible answer. Now, I don't think there is any way in which any of us are ever going to put our finger down on the reason that we're doing it and how it is that we find a way of coming into being, positioning ourselves so that what it is that we want will assert itself and manifest itself in a prescribed manner.
Working in clay, do you feel akin to the earth? Do you feel like that you're pulling these clay pieces that you made out from the earth, or restructuring the earth?
I very definitely feel that having plowed the earth, having picked it up and felt just exactly whether it was or whether it wasn't ready to put a seed into the earth so that the plant will grow. I'm very, very close to the earth. I feel that it's my mother, in a sense. And when I work in clay, yes, I very definitely feel that what I'm doing is working with something that actually I'm stepping into an area that we know that almost every culture has found a way to make human beings out of clay and then breathing life into them. It makes you almost begin to think that possibly if there is going to be a God, well, maybe you can have that God in your own image and be it.
Can you envision your life as not having been an artist? Could you have lived your life without making art?
No. No, it was a necessity, and every time I tried to avoid it, I felt ashamed of myself for having been so unprincipled. And I was always most happy when I came back to being what I was meant to be. Now, I think that if I had continued, it would have been on a suicidal path. Not that I didn't enjoy, I love to make things. I love to see things come into being. I like to handle animals. It's a great life. It's a wonderful life. But somewhere along the line, being an artist is the thing that I was meant to be.